feel like a lot of people react to the headline without even watching the entire video. It is the worst product I've ever reviewed.
If you're looking to buy a new phone, laptop, or even a car, how do you decide what to buy? 18 million people go to Marques Brownlee's YouTube channel. Marques, or MKBHD online, is undeniably the most powerful man in tech product reviews.
I actually love this thing. I love this thing. Not because it's flawless or anything. It is far from flawless, but because it's actually interesting.
He's typically known as being extremely excited about new technology and very fair. But recently, he's been getting a lot of heat online for a few negative reviews that he's done on things like the Humane AI Pin or the Fisker car.
If you ask me, like, who should buy this device right now? I mean, nobody should buy this device right now.
I think it's just the worst car I've ever tested.
People in Silicon Valley have been blaming him for destroying companies, calling him a traitor and unethical for giving honest feedback on products that didn't quite live up to the hype. So I called Marques up to talk about what it means to review a tech product in today's internet climate, how content creators are reshaping the tech press, why people in Silicon Valley can't seem to handle criticism, and to get his thoughts on the biggest products out right now and what we might be seeing in the future. All right, Marques, you've reviewed the Humane AI Pin. I've seen tons of negative reviews from a lot of people on YouTube, but then you reviewed it. You said it was the worst product that you've ever reviewed. People lost their minds. Why do you think people are so sensitive right now about this review?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like a lot of people, and this is probably true about articles too, react to the headline without even watching the entire video. Totally. I mean, it happens all the time. It's a 25-minute video. So the title is particularly interesting. It is the worst product I've ever reviewed. And I thought about that one for a long time. And the reason I landed on that, because I did deliberate a bunch of different titles, is there are other bad products that I've used where there's just one thing or two things that are horrible about it. I reviewed the Dyson headphones. I don't know if you remember those,
Yes.
a couple months ago.
Seriously? Dyson, are you pranking us right now? It's $1,000 for air purifying headphones. I wasn't really sure what to think. Probably safe to ignore it.
With the air filter thing, I called it the dumbest product I've ever reviewed. Like, all they really do is their headphones and their filter, and they were not great headphones and not a great filter. Anyway, this Humane Pin had lots of things that were, like, a shocking amount of things bad about it. Overheated all the time, slow, horrible battery life, didn't feel useful, projector not usable outdoors. Like, the list is longer than I've ever seen. So I was actually totally fine, and I said in the video, this is the worst product I've ever reviewed. But that was probably the thing that lit people up, because like you said, a lot of other people reviewed these, but not everybody used the same headline. So that probably had something to do with it. There were some reactions you probably saw on Twitter, kind of set off a whole chain.
Yeah.
You know the rest of the story.
I have to say, I actually watched the review having seen the reaction, and I found it to be extremely thoughtful, actually not totally vicious review at all. I mean, you were totally fair. You also, you start off complimenting it and kind of the design, and obviously, you go into most of the critiques of it and how impossible it is to use. In your follow-up video, you were saying sort of, I think the headline on it was, do bad reviews kill companies? Do bad reviews actually kill companies? And who's at fault for that?
A review video, all it really is doing is accelerating whatever is happening. If this review is honest, which we're saying this negative review is saying, okay, this is a bad product, and it's telling more people that it's a bad product, all that's really doing is accelerating, like, all the people who were going to buy it and then realize it's bad and return it, or all the people who are going to eventually find out via research or word of mouth or whatever that it's a bad product. It's just moving us further down that timeline. So I don't feel like it's the review that's sparking this, like, downfall of a company by any means. I think it's pretty clear that you only get a negative review if you have a product worthy of a negative review. And that's what really sparks everything. So it's just a matter of time before people find out.
Right now, we're living in this era of SponCon, and I feel like so much of what you see about tech online is these sponsored rave reviews of everything. I work at the Washington Post, and we sometimes no longer get access to products or events because Silicon Valley is looking to go to content creators over journalists for reviews because they tend to be more positive. How do you navigate being truthful and critical of these products while still making sure that you retain a certain level of access?
Yeah, luckily I don't find that too much of a difficult navigation. I think it's an interesting question with a lot of creators because they're maybe more in a position where okay, if I am too honest here and this is too negative, then maybe the company won't like what I say and they won't invite me next time. They'll invite someone else. And I definitely sympathize with that. But I'm happy to say that because we're basically always honest about everything, that companies expect that from us, that they're not going to revoke access because we're suddenly honest about something. And as a matter of fact, that kind of looks bad on their part, doesn't it? If I say
Yeah.
something about a company that's truthful and negative, and then some blacklisted whatever happens, that's not a good look for them.
Yeah. And I feel like also, I mean, you have made a name for yourself and have 18 million followers and kind of like, are this revered reviewer. I guess I'm curious how you think about content creators that are starting out a little bit, where I think actually developing those relationships and maybe getting access to those products early, if you have one of the first, for instance, Apple Pro Vision, whatever videos, that can be enticing. How do you suggest younger creators kind of build those relationships or navigate those relationships?
I would actually suggest do not make that one of the key elements of your new channel. If you're starting up, one of the hardest things to do is differentiate yourself in a way that makes your video worth watching. And that's doubly true when you're making a product video, because if it's this thing that we're all reviewing, everyone's reviewing the same thing. Why would I watch 35 videos on the same thing when I can watch the first 4 and get everything I need to know? So if you're trying to differentiate yourself, it is extremely difficult and rare to differentiate yourself by being in the early wave. Some people are able to do that with the access that you're talking about. But I think there's other better ways to be more personable or more honest in your own way. I think that's a better way to differentiate yourself. I think to find niche things that you're really passionate about, more so than the average reviewer, I think is another great way to differentiate yourself. So I'd actually advise against making like your access or your connections to the company is the thing that you're differentiating yourself with.
So I want to talk more about sort of like the algorithm and, being thoughtful in a review. You posted this very thoughtful video with this title that got people talking, got people in. How do you balance being thoughtful about your review versus appeasing the algorithm, which favors this very sort of clickbaity and extreme framing?
Yeah, I mean, it is an evolving and very complicated process. The relationship between the creator and their audience and the platform that they're on and the tools available to them. YouTube now will give us A/B testing for different thumbnails, but oftentimes the thumbnail has a direct relationship to the title, and we can't A/B test titles, so we have to do 2 different thumbnails that work with the same title. Like it gets really into the weeds really fast. But I think in general, my philosophy is, okay, we're trying to reach kind of 2 buckets of people with our product review. Bucket number 1 is people who are shopping for that product. Bucket number 2 is people watching videos on YouTube for entertainment or being informed. So the title, the packaging of the video is sort of a balancing act at being able to frame it for both those buckets of people. It's a bit of a writing exercise, to be honest. We have lots of drafts of titles and thumbnails and things that can come together eventually to be the final packaging for the video.
How big is the team that works on that?
I mean, that literally, I might turn around at my desk and be like, hey guys, do you think this is a bad title? And I'll write it on the whiteboard, and it's like all 12 people here at the studio are like, how about this? How about that? Many minds is better than one. So it comes down to me at the end of the day. But yeah, the Humane Pin one was a harder one to come up with because I don't think most people actually knew what this product was when clicking into the video. And I think they were getting educated about it right from the second they clicked. And I think that's important. And I think, here's maybe a hot take, or not. I think if I titled this Humane AI Pin Review, and that's it, then this none of this is even a conversation. It's just another review of a thing that not too many people are interested in, so not too many people watch, and here we are. And so in order to get the other bucket of people who were here to learn something and didn't know about the pin to actually watch this video and learn something, I had to try to package it in a way to loop them in as well.
Why haven't you ever gone to work in tech? And is there any tech company that could sort of successfully woo you? I feel like you're everybody's number one favorite tech personality, I guess, commentator. You're so smart about products. Has Apple, one of these car companies, like tried to recruit you and would that ever be a path that you would go down?
Yeah, I mean, so it's happened. I do think the line in the sand for my own priorities is pretty clear, which is if I review, let's say I review a lot of smartphones, right? If a smartphone company comes along and says, "Hey, would you like to work with us on making a new smartphone?" Even if I am extremely conscious about siloing off that section of my brain to help them make this phone really good, I have to understand that when people watch me review smartphones from that moment on, in the back of their head, there's always like, is he taking it easy on this phone because it's his? Is he being more harsh on this other phone because he wants his own phone to do better? Like that conflict of interest is impossible to fully navigate. So I just completely avoid it. If it's a company that does anything in the area of products that I review, that's where the line in the sand is. I'm not doing that.
Do you have like a formal ethics policy, or it sounds like, what you're talking about is ultimately like conflict of interest sort of mitigating. Do you have somewhere that says like, hey, here's all the policies we abide by, kind of like a newsroom?
I don't, but that's a good idea.
Or is it more informal?
Yeah, it's more informal. I mean, I've done a video. The video I did is called "Can You Trust Marques Brownlee" or MKBHD, one of those two things. But like, can you trust me? And in that video, I just lay out like, okay, here's where I draw the lines in the sand. So that's the closest thing I have to an ethics policy. But yeah, I should probably like write it down. That would be that's a good idea. Yeah.
How much are you using AI? I feel like there's so much talk of AI disrupting creators.
A little bit. I use the chatbots a little bit, sometimes for brainstorming, sometimes for coming up with clever alliterations or analogies for videos. It can be fun to literally just ask it, because at this point they all know what an MKBHD video is, so I can kind of ask it what an MKBHD video would be and just kind of play with it and see what it says. But it's not making thumbnails or videos for me at this point. It's kind of just a fun tool to play with.
Have you seen any products come along lately that you think will really impact life for content creators? I know there was all this hype about the Apple Vision Pro, and then that kind of faded away, but what do you think is going to sort of shape that market?
Yeah, I think if you're in the tech world a lot, you can kind of get really optimistic about really rapid changes, like, oh, this in 3 years is going to be huge for content creators. But every time that happens, it seems to sort of fizzle out. So what I will keep doing is keeping my eye on things. The one thing that keeps coming back up over and over again is VR. Like, clearly we're going to have VR content or 360 content. This was what we thought like 8-9 years ago. I made like a studio tour with like a 360 camera so you could like look around the studio. And still isn't like full on mainstream, but I think eventually it feels like the next step where like we can make fully immersive content for people to watch on more than just like a 2D screen like this. Other than that, I could be surprised. Could be anything.
Yeah, I feel like we see these cycles of excitement. I mean, I'm thinking of all the talk of the metaverse just 2 years ago, and Facebook renaming their whole company.
Yeah.
And then it fading out. The 360 camera thing was also really big. I think it was F8 in 2017 when they gave everyone the little Theta 360 and said, this is how you're going to consume content.
Yeah, we fully thought that would be like when I did that studio tour, that was in a time where I remember feeling like I got asked about 360 and VR a lot. And it was like, yeah, I do videos from the first person perspective so you can see the phone in my hand. But yeah, the natural progression of that is you're in my studio looking at the phone in front of you, just like sitting where I am. So yeah, we're all going to make 360 videos like next year, right? Like it's happening, right? And here we are. Like I don't know how long it's going to take to actually get to that point.
I will tell you, Marques, I tried to become a 360 video vlogger that year. It was I was doing social media. What I found is I've made a whole Facebook page called Taylor 360. Most people couldn't understand the video, and when you looked at sort of how they were viewing the video, they were just looking down. Your phone, you're looking down, and 360 video, you really have to put the phone up. No one was picking the phone up, and they were just kind of like, what is this video?
Yeah, that sounds like a challenge.
I think 360 video is not meant to be viewed on your phone, TLDR.
Yeah.
What about autonomous cars? That's another thing that I feel like we're all told is really close. I think Waymo is now here in LA. How long until you think we won't have to drive ourselves?
If you ask just Silicon Valley this question, very optimistic. I mean, Waymo's roaming around the streets like everybody. A lot of people buy Teslas for the feature. But then you get to suburbia and you get to middle America and you get out of the bubble, and it doesn't feel anytime soon. Like, people are not thinking too hard about it. Like, yeah, of course, highway cruise control is nice and convenient, but autonomous cars are like a trust issue with a lot of people. The headlining part, which I think, to Elon's credit, he's said a lot of times, is like getting the error rate down below human error rate is probably a good benchmark. So yeah, I don't know. That's also another thing where tech fails sometimes, and that's going to be a problem every time it happens in this world of self-driving cars.
Yeah. Speaking of Elon, he's trying to pivot X into more of a video platform. We've seen creators like Mr. Beast, put their content on there. I think he has some monetization options. What are your thoughts on X as a platform and what Elon is sort of doing with it?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. Honestly, very interesting to watch. I am curious about posting videos on X, and I have tried a couple. I've tried a couple clips. I've tried a couple full-length videos. One thing that's been true forever about publishing videos on a platform online is ad support needs to exist. Like, monetization has to be built in. And a lot of them don't want to touch X right now, so that just can't work without them coming back together. So that's still a thing. I personally want way more analytics. I think YouTube analytics is like the gold standard for learning about your video's performance and improving. And X does not do that well yet. So I would really hope they improve that too.
Is there a product of the year for you so far?
Whoa. So product of the year, I assuming you mean like positive, like MVP award type product of the year.
Yeah, assuming Humane is maybe the worst product of the year.
Yeah.
What are you really hyped about?
Yeah, we've got some bangers. I mean, Cybertruck is this year technically, right? Vision Pro is definitely this year. We have a couple others that we know are in the pipeline. Smartphones are always getting interesting. Product of the year so far, it's probably between Vision Pro and Cybertruck. Both very expensive. Both very few people have bought it. Both have had headlining issues with durability, but both pretty interesting. And we don't get a lot of truly interesting products. So it's probably between those two.
Awesome. All right, Marques. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was really great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
I will not be buying the Humane AI Pin anytime soon.
There you go.
All right, that's the show. Power User was produced by Travis Larchuk and Jelani Carter. It's mixed and mastered by Brandon McFarland. Our video producer is Brandon Kiefer. Our executive producers are Nishat Kurwa and Zach Mack. Power User is part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. If you like the show, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Power User. See you then.